My sister didn't just evict me after the funeral, she threw boxes at me, mocking my poverty. She thought she'd won the $10 million estate, but she didn't know I'd already seen the will and her cruelty was about to cost her everything. Before we begin today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, this channel is shutting down. But don't worry, the stories continue. Please subscribe to our new channel, Daily Drip Stories. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The mud from the cemetery was still clinging to the heels of my black boots, a heavy, caked reminder of where I had just left my heart. The house was silent in a way that felt violent, a hollow, echoing stillness that amplified the ringing in my ears. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night for the last 6 months, and today, standing in the grand foyer of the home where I had spent every waking moment nursing my parents, my body finally felt like it was shutting down. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from a bone-deep exhaustion that made my marrow ache. I leaned against the mahogany console table, staring at the vase of white lilies someone had sent. Their scent was cloying, suffocating. I just wanted to sit down. I just wanted to take off these boots, curl up on the sofa that still smelled like my father's pipe tobacco, and sleep for a week. The front door banged open, shattering the silence. I jumped, my heart hammering a painful rhythm against my ribs. I turned to see my sister, Elena, storming in, the heavy oak door slamming against the stop. She wasn't alone. Her husband, Marcus, was right behind her, his face flushed, his arms loaded with flattened cardboard boxes. "Elena," I croaked, my voice raspy from crying. "What's going on? The guests. The wake isn't even over at the parish hall." Elena didn't look at me. She marched to the center of the foyer, her expensive black stilettos clicking sharply on the marble. She looked immaculate. Not a hair out of place, her makeup perfectly setting her face into a mask of tragic beauty that she had worn so well at the graveside. But here, inside the house, the mask slipped. "Marcus, drop them," she commanded. Marcus grunted and let the stack of cardboard boxes slide from his grip. They hit the floor with a dull, heavy slap, sliding across the polished stone until they bumped against the toes of my muddy boots. I looked down at the boxes, then up at her, confusion clouding my already foggy mind. "I don't understand. What are these for?" Elena finally looked at me. Her eyes were dry, clear, and cold as ice. She crossed her arms over her chest, the fabric of her designer coat rustling softly. "They're for your things, Sophie," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Pack." "Pack," I repeated the word as if it were a foreign language. "Pack what?" "Elena, Mom and Dad were buried 2 hours ago. I live here." "Not anymore," she snapped, stepping closer, invading my personal space until I could smell the sharp tang of her wine breath. "You lived here to take care of them. They're gone. The job is done. And frankly, looking at you is depressing. You look like a ghost." "I look like this because I haven't slept in 3 years, Elena." My voice cracked, a surge of hysterical laughter bubbling up in my throat. "I'm exhausted. Can we please talk about this tomorrow?" "No," Marcus chimed in, stepping up beside her. He adjusted his tie, refusing to meet my eyes. "We need the property vacated. We're listing it on Monday. The market is hot and we can't have clutter." "Clutter," I whispered. "I'm your sister." Elena let out a short, derisive scoff. She looked me up and down, taking in my frayed coat, my pale skin, the dark circles under my eyes that made me look skeletal. "You're a leech, Sophie. You've been living off Mom and Dad's dime for years while I was out in the real world building a career. Well, the free ride is over. You have 24 hours to fill those boxes and get out." She kicked one of the boxes toward me. It hit my shin, a sharp flare of pain that finally woke me up. "And if you think you're staying another night in the master suite, forget it," she hissed. "Go find a motel or a shelter, I don't care. Just find another place to die because you aren't doing it here." The cruelty of her words hung in the air, heavier than the silence had been. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and realized that the grief I felt for our parents was something she didn't share. She was calculating numbers. She was measuring square footage. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and stinging. "You can't do this," I whispered. "Watch me," she smiled, a predator baring teeth. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. My legs finally gave out. I sank onto the bottom. Step of the grand staircase, my knees hitting the hard wood with a thud that jarred my spine. The physical pain was grounding, a sharp counterpoint to the surreal nightmare unfolding in the foyer. Elena didn't offer a hand. She didn't flinch. She simply watched me fall, her expression one of mild annoyance, like I was a stain on the carpet she couldn't wait to scrub out. "Stop being dramatic, Sophie," she sighed, pulling her phone out of her clutch. She started tapping away, likely already texting her real estate photographer. "It's pathetic. You're nearly 30 years old. It's time you grew up and fended for yourself." "Fended for myself?" I managed to say, clutching the banister to pull myself upright. The adrenaline was starting to pump now, burning through the fog of fatigue. "Elena, I had a career. I was a landscape architect. I had a life. I gave it all up when Mom got sick. I moved back in because they needed 24-hour care, and you were too busy." "I was working," she shot back, not looking up from her phone. "Someone had to be successful in this family. Someone had to maintain our status. You were better suited for domestic work. It's not my fault you chose to be a glorified nursemaid." "I didn't choose it because I wanted to be a maid," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and grief. "I did it because I loved them, and because they were terrified of going into a facility. I promised them they could stay home." "And they did," Marcus interjected, his voice oily and patronizing. He walked over to the large oil painting of our grandfather hanging near the study, inspecting the frame. "You did a great job, Sophie, really, but let's be realistic. You have no income. You have no savings. You can't afford the property taxes on a place like this for a week, let alone a year. We're doing you a favor. We'll sell the house, liquidate the assets, and maybe we can cut you a small check from the proceeds to get you started. A severance package, if you will." A severance package. He was talking about my life, about our family home, as if it were a failed business merger. "I spent my savings on their medication," I said quietly. "On the night nurses when I physically couldn't stay awake anymore. On the special dietary food. I have $400 in my bank account, Marcus." "See?" Elena gestured at me with her phone. "You're destitute. You're a liability. If we leave you here, the house will fall into disrepair within a month. We are the executors, Sophie. We have a fiduciary duty to the estate to maximize its value." She walked over to the window, looking out at the sprawling grounds. The gardens I had designed and maintained with my own hands so Mom could look out and see flowers until her very last day. "10 million, she murmured, almost to herself but loud enough for me to hear. "Conservative estimate. The land alone is worth 8. "You can't sell it before the will is read," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mr. Sterling is coming tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We have to wait for the official reading." Elena turned, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, Sophie, sweet, naive Sophie, we know what the will says. It splits everything 50-50 between the surviving children. That's standard. And since I'm the eldest and Marcus has the financial background, we're taking lead on the liquidation. Mr. Sterling is just a formality, a rubber stamp." She walked back toward the door, stepping over the boxes she had thrown at me. "Start packing," she commanded again. "I want the personal items cleared out of the common areas by tomorrow morning. If you don't do it, I'll hire a junk crew to toss it all in a dumpster." She grabbed the door handle. "And Sophie, take a shower, you smell like a hospital." With that, she swept out into the rainy afternoon, Marcus trailing behind her like a loyal dog, closing the door with a finality that echoed through the house. I sat there in the silence, the mud drying on my boots, the cardboard boxes surrounding me like a barricade. My stomach twisted with nausea. They were so sure of themselves, so confident in their victory. They saw me as weak, broken, and defeated. a piece of trash to be swept out so they could cash in. I looked at the grandfather clock ticking rhythmically in the corner. 10 o'clock tomorrow, Mr. Sterling. A strange calmness began to settle over me, cooling the heat of my anger. It was true I was exhausted. It was true I was broke. It was true that on paper I looked like a victim. But as I stared at the door they had just walked out of, a thought solidified in my mind, sharp and clear. They had done the math, they had checked the market value, they had planned the sale. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I didn't pack, not a single box. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, made a pot of strong black tea, and sat at the scarred oak table where my mother used to solve her crossword puzzles every S. Unday. The house was filled with ghosts, but not the scary kind. I looked at the spot by the sink where my father had collapsed 2 years ago, the first stroke. I remembered the terror of that day, the ambulance lights flashing against the kitchen cabinets. That was the day I quit my job at the firm. I had been up for a promotion, designing a massive urban park project downtown. I walked into my boss's office, handed over my files, and never looked back. For 3 years, my world had shrunk to the 4 walls of this estate. My social life evaporated. My friends stopped calling when I couldn't make it to brunch because mom needed her nebulizer treatments or dad needed help with his physical therapy exercises. My career became managing pill organizers, navigating insurance mazes, and learning how to lift a grown man without breaking my own back. I looked at my hands, wrapped around the warm mug. They were rough, the skin dry from constant washing. My fingernails were short and unpolished. Then I thought about Alina's hands. Manicured, soft, adorned with a diamond ring that probably cost more than the specialized hospital bed I had fought the insurance company to approve for Dad. Alina hadn't been here for the nights when Mom was hallucinating from the pain medication, screaming for people who weren't there. She hadn't been here to clean up the messes, to wash the sheets 3 times a day, to spoon-feed Dad when his hands shook too much to hold a fork. She would pop in once every 2 months, usually on a Sunday afternoon for exactly 45 minutes. She would breeze in, wearing white linen that never seemed to get dirty, and sit in the living room, never the sick room. "Oh, it smells a bit. Sterile in here, doesn't it?" She would wrinkle her nose. "Sophie, are you sure you're managing? You look dreadful." She would drink a glass of wine, talk about her latest listing, a penthouse downtown, a waterfront villa, and then check her watch. "Well, I simply must run. Marcus and I have a gala tonight." She never asked how they were really doing. She never asked if I needed a break. But she always asked about the house. "Did you get the roof inspected after the storm?" she'd ask. Or, "Make sure the gardener trims the hedges away from the brickwork. We don't want moisture damage." It wasn't concern for the home. It was concern for the asset. And then there was Marcus. If Alina was the shark, Marcus was the remora that attached itself to her underbelly. He was a wealth manager, though I had heard Dad whispering to Mom a year ago that Marcus had made some very risky bets with client money. Dad never trusted him. "He shakes hands like he's trying to steal your watch," Dad had said. I remembered a moment, just 3 weeks ago, when Dad was in his final decline. Alina and Marcus had come over. Dad was asleep in the library, which we had converted into his bedroom so he didn't have to use the stairs. I had walked out of the kitchen with a tray of tea and stopped in the hallway. The door to the library was slightly ajar. Marcus was inside. He wasn't sitting by Dad's bedside. He wasn't holding the hand of the dying man. He was standing by the antique secretary desk, using the flashlight on his phone to examine the maker's mark on a bronze statue. He was appraising the furniture while his father-in-law took shallow, rattling breaths 5 feet away. I hadn't said anything then. I was too tired to fight. I just backed away and made noise with the tea tray so he would jump away. Now, sitting in the kitchen, the memory made my blood boil. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They thought I was stupid because I was kind. They saw my sacrifice as submission. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window. The rain was stopping. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing a steel-gray sky. Tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. Mr. Sterling would be here. He was an old-school lawyer, a man who wore three-piece suits and still used a fountain pen. He had been my father's attorney for 40 years. He had seen everything. And he had been the one to call me, privately, 6 months ago. "Sophie," he had said, his voice gravelly and low, "your parents are making some changes to their estate plan. They want to speak with you, alone, without Alina." I took a deep breath. Alina and Marcus were planning a celebration. They were probably already popping champagne, toasting to their newfound liquidity, planning which debts to pay off and which luxury cars to lease. They had no idea that the clutter they wanted to throw away was the only person who knew the truth. I woke up before the sun did. The digital clock on my bedside table read 5:14 a.m. My body was still screaming for the rest I had been denied for years, aching with a deep, throbbing resonance that seemed to emanate from my very bones. But my mind? My mind was razor-sharp, humming with a frequency I hadn't felt since my days managing high-stakes landscape architecture. Projects. I rolled out of bed, the floorboards cold against my bare feet. I didn't go to the kitchen immediately. Instead, I went to the small, fireproof safe in the back of my father's closet. My hands were steady as I spun the dial, right to 24, left to 10, right to 55. Their anniversary. Inside lay a single, thick manila envelope. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. I had been there when Dad signed it, his hand shaking but his eyes fierce with determination. I had been the one to drive the witness, Mrs. Higgins from next door, to the house because Dad didn't want Alina to see a notary's car in the driveway. I took the envelope out, weighing it in my hands. This was my shield, but I needed a sword. Alina and Marcus weren't just greedy, they were desperate. Yesterday's display, the boxes, the eviction threat, the sheer panic in Marcus's eyes when he talked about liquidity, smelled of something darker than just entitlement. You don't evict your grieving sister 24 hours after a funeral unless you are running from something terrifying. I needed to know what they were running from. I showered, scrubbing the cemetery mud from my skin until I was pink and raw. I dressed not in my caregiver uniform of sweatpants and oversized tees, but in a structured black blazer, dark jeans, and my old leather boots. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. When I looked in the mirror, the ghost Alina had mocked was gone. Staring back was the woman who used to negotiate million-dollar contracts with city councils. I went downstairs to the study. It was 6:30 a.m. I opened my laptop and logged into a professional database I still had access to, a legacy account from my old firm. I wasn't just a landscape architect. I had specialized in high-end commercial zoning. I knew how to look up property liens and court filings. I typed in Marcus Thorne. The screen populated with a loading bar that seemed to crawl. My heart thudded against my ribs. Ping. 3 results. The first was a standard mortgage on their condo. The second was a lien on that same condo, filed 6 months ago. The third was a civil lawsuit filed in the state Supreme Court just 2 weeks prior. Plaintiff, Vantage Capital Group. Defendant, Marcus Thorne/Thorne Wealth Management. Cause of action, breach of contract, fraud, misappropriation of funds. I clicked on the filing. My breath hitched as I scanned the legalese. Marcus was being sued for $2 million. He had allegedly churned client accounts to cover personal gambling debts. "Oh, Marcus," I whispered to the empty room, a cold smile touching my lips. "You didn't just need the inheritance, you needed a bailout." I printed the documents. The printer whirred and clicked in the silence of the house, a mechanical rhythm of war. At 7:45 a.m., the sound of tires on gravel crunched outside. They were early. I peered through the heavy velvet drapes. It wasn't just Alina's silver Mercedes. Following her was a white van with premier staging and estate clearance, stenciled on the side. She wasn't waiting for the reading. She was starting the erasure of our parents immediately. I grabbed the printed court documents and slid them into a leather portfolio, placing it casually on the desk. I walked into the foyer just as the front door swung open. Elena breezed in, holding a latte in one hand and her phone in the other. She stopped dead when she saw me. Her eyes flicked over my blazer, my boots, my hair. She seemed momentarily thrown by the change in my appearance, but she recovered quickly, her expression hardening into a sneer. "Well," she drawled, taking a sip of her coffee. "You're dressed. Does that mean you're leaving?" "Good morning to you too, Elena," I said, my voice calm, level, and utterly devoid of the trembling weakness she had seen yesterday. "Who is in the van?" "The stagers," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "They're going to start measuring the rooms and boxing up the junk. I told them to start in the library." "The library?" I blocked her path to the hallway. "No, Mr. Sterling will be here at 10 for the reading. We are holding the meeting in the library. Nobody touches that room until he is gone." Elena laughed, a sharp barking sound. "Sophie, you really need to understand the hierarchy here. I am the executor. I give the orders. You are the squatter. Now move." She stepped forward, expecting me to shrink away as I had for the last 3 years whenever she bullied me. I didn't move. I stood my ground, planting my feet. "I said no," I stated, my voice dropping an octave. "You can measure the bedrooms upstairs. You can measure the kitchen. But you will not bring strangers into Dad's study before his will is read. If you try, I will call the police and report a trespassing disturbance during a probate dispute. Do you want a squad car in the driveway when the real estate photographer shows up?" Elena's eyes widened. She stared at me, her th slightly agape. She looked for the broken, weeping sister she had left on the stairs yesterday, but she couldn't find her. "Fine," she hissed, her face flushing a blotchy red. "Upstairs first, but the second that lawyer leaves, this entire floor gets gutted." She spun on her heel and marched back out to the driveway to yell at the crew. I watched her go, my heart pounding, but my hands steady. I had the leverage. I had the trap. Now I just had to wait for them to walk right into it. Mr. Sterling arrived at 9:55 a.m. sharp. He drove the same vintage Jaguar he had owned since I was a child, a car that smelled of old leather and mints. He was a small man, impeccably dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit, carrying a battered leather briefcase that looked like it had survived a war. Elena and Marcus were already seated in the library. They had claimed the 2 wingback chairs by the fireplace, Dad's favorite spots. They looked like royalty holding court. Marcus was scrolling nervously on his tablet, his leg bouncing. Elena was examining her fingernails, looking bored. I sat on the small sofa to the side, my hands folded in my lap, the leather portfolio resting on the cushion beside me. Mr. Sterling entered, nodding to me with a warmth that didn't extend to the other 2. "Sophie, my condolences again." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I said softly. Yes, very sad," Elena interrupted, checking her watch. "Mr. Sterling, we have a very tight schedule today. The stagers are waiting and Marcus has a flight to catch this evening for a conference. Can we expedite this? We all know the standard boilerplate. Split down the middle, liquidate the assets, dissolve the trust." Mr. Sterling moved slowly. He set his briefcase on the desk, clicked the latches open with 2 loud snaps, and took out a pair of reading glasses. He cleaned them with a microfiber cloth, taking his time, inspecting the lenses against the light. "Elena," Mr. Sterling said, his voice dry and crackling like parchment, "probate is rarely boilerplate, and the wishes of your parents were quite specific." "Specific?" Marcus looked up, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean specific? It's a standard estate." "Nothing about Arthur and Martha was standard," Mr. Sterling muttered. He pulled a thick document from the briefcase. The seal on the front was unbroken red wax. "Shall we begin?" he asked. "Please," Elena sighed, rolling her eyes. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "I, Arthur James Bennett, being of sound mind." He read through the standard introductions, the burial wishes, the small bequests to charities. Elena tapped her foot impatiently. Skip to the property, Sterling, the house, the land. Mr. Sterling paused. He looked over the rim of his glasses at Alina, then he looked at Marcus. Finally, his eyes rested on me. Article 5, the distribution of real property, he read. Alina sat up straighter. Marcus stopped bouncing his leg. Regarding the primary residence located at 44 Oak Hill Drive, along with the surrounding 20 acres of land, the guest cottage, and all contents therein. Mr. Sterling paused for effect. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. I hereby bequeath the entirety of this property, solely and exclusively, to my daughter, Sophie Bennett. The heir left the room. Alina didn't move. She stared at the lawyer, her face frozen in a rictus of confusion. "What?" she whispered. "Furthermore," Mr. Sterling continued, his voice gaining strength, "this bequest is made in recognition of Sophie's unwavering devotion, her sacrifice of her personal and professional life to provide end-of-life care for myself and my wife, and her desire to preserve the family legacy. To my daughter Alina, I leave the sum of $50,000, with the hope that she finds contentment in the life she has chosen away from this family." "That's a lie," Alina screamed. She shot out of the chair so fast it tipped backward, crashing onto the floor. "That's a lie, you're lying." "I assure you, Mrs. Thorne, I am reading the document exactly as it was drafted and signed 6 months ago," Mr. Sterling said calmly. 6 months ago? Marcus stood up, his face draining of color, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. That can't be right. They were sick. They weren't in their right minds. Sophie made them do this. He turned on me, pointing a shaking finger. "You manipulated them. You poisoned them against us. You were here alone with them day and night, whispering in their ears." "I was here wiping their chins," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. "I was here administering their morphine. Where were you, Marcus? Where were you, Alina?" "We were working," Alina shrieked. She walked toward the desk, slamming her hands down on the wood. "This is undue influence. It's textbook. You took advantage of 2 senile old people to steal my inheritance. I will contest this. I will tie this up in court for years. You won't see a dime, Sophie. I will bleed this estate dry in legal fees before I let you have it." "You can try," Mr. Sterling said, closing the folder. "But your parents anticipated this reaction. There is a no contest clause. If you challenge the will and lose, you forfeit the $50,000. And given that we recorded the signing on video to prove their competency." "Video?" Alina choked out. "Yes, would you like to see it?" Mr. Sterling asked, his eyes gleaming with a hint of steel. "Your father had some choice words about your visits." Alina looked like she had been slapped. She turned to me, her eyes wild with hatred. "You little witch, you planned this, you knew." "Yes," I said, standing up. "I knew. You let us hire the stagers. You let us plan the listing." "I didn't let you do anything, Alina. You didn't ask me. You just threw boxes at my feet and told me to die somewhere else." Marcus rounded the desk, moving toward me. He looked dangerous, his desperation overriding his common sense. "Listen to me, you selfish little—" "Stop," I said. I picked up the leather portfolio from the sofa. "Before you say another word, Marcus, you might want to look at this." I unzipped the portfolio and slid the court documents across the coffee table toward him. "What is this?" he sneered, looking down. He read the first line, then the second. His mouth snapped shut. He looked up at me, terror flooding his eyes. "I know why you need the sale, Marcus," I said quietly. "I know about Vantage Capital. I know about the lawsuit. And I know you don't have the money to fight a probate battle. You don't even have the money to pay your own defense attorney, do you?" Alina looked between us, confusion warring with her rage. "Marcus, what is she talking about?" Marcus didn't answer. He was staring at the paper as if it were a death sentence. "Tell her, Marcus," I said. "Tell her why you were appraising the furniture while Dad was dying in the next room." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Alina snatched the paper from Marcus's hand. Her eyes scanned the document, darting back and forth as she tried to comprehend the legal jargon. Fraud, she breathed, the word hanging in the air like smoke. Misappropriation, $2 million. She looked up at her husband, the color draining from her face until she looked as pale as the paper she held. Marcus, tell me this is a mistake. Tell me this is some other Marcus Thorne. Marcus wiped a sheen of sweat from his upper lip. His suave, financial advisor persona was crumbling, revealing the cornered rat underneath. Elena, baby, it's a misunderstanding. A disgruntled client. Complicated. The market turned and I had to move some positions around. It's standard practice, really. Standard practice to steal client funds? I asked, crossing my arms. Is it standard practice to bet $2 million you don't have? The lawsuit says you used the money for high-risk personal speculation. That sounds a lot like gambling to me. Shut up, Marcus roared, turning on me. You don't know anything about finance. You dug up some dirt to try and blackmail us. I'm not blackmailing you, I said calmly. I'm protecting my parents' legacy. You intended to liquidate this house immediately because you have a court date coming up, don't you? You need the cash to settle before it goes to trial and you lose your license. Maybe even go to prison. Elena dropped the paper. She looked at Marcus with a dawning horror. You told me we were selling to buy the villa in Saint-Tropez. You told me the business was booming. It will boom, Marcus pleaded, reaching for her hand. She recoiled. Elena, listen. If we sell this place, I can pay them back. It goes away, we still have millions left over. We just need to get her, he jabbed a finger at me, to agree to a settlement. We can challenge the will, we can make a deal. He turned his desperate gaze on me. Sophie, look, be reasonable, you can't maintain this place. The taxes alone are $50,000 a year, you have no job, you have $400 in the bank, you need us. Let's split it. We sell, you get $5 million, that's more money than you'll ever see in your life. You can travel. You can restart your little garden business. I don't want $5 million, I said. I want my home. You're being an idiot, Marcus shouted, stepping closer, his hands balling into fists. You think you can run this estate? You'll be bankrupt in 6 months, and then the bank will take it and nobody gets anything. I have a plan, I said, though my heart was hammering against my ribs at his proximity. And unlike you, Marcus, I don't gamble. Mr. Sterling, Elena said, her voice trembling. Is this true? Can we force a sale, if Sophie is financially incapable of maintaining the asset? Mr. Sterling looked up from his file, his expression unamused. Sophie's financial status is irrelevant to the validity of the bequest. However, he paused, looking at me. Marcus is correct about the taxes and upkeep. It is a substantial burden. See, Marcus seized on this. She can't afford it. The court will appoint a trustee if she can't prove solvency. We can petition for that. Elena's eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope. The shark was circling back. Yes, exactly. We'll petition the court to appoint a conservator for the estate until Sophie can prove she has the funds, which she doesn't. She turned to me, a cruel smile returning. You might have the deed, Sophie, but you don't have the cash. We can still crush you. We have lawyers on retainer who specialize in this. You have lawyers on retainer? I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. Elena, did you read the lawsuit? Marcus's assets are frozen, all of them, including your joint accounts. Elena froze. What? Paragraph 4, I pointed to the paper on the floor. Preliminary injunction freezing all assets of the defendant and his spouse pending the outcome of the hearing. Elena scrambled to pick up the paper again. She read it, her lips moving silently. Then she let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. My accounts, she screeched. My personal savings. Everything, Marcus mumbled, looking at the floor. They went after everything. You ruined me. Elena began to hit him, slapping his chest, his arms, his face. You told me it was handled. You told me I was safe. We can still fix it. Marcus grabbed her wrists, shaking her. We just need the house. We need to make Sophie sell. He turned to me, his eyes wild. You have to sell, Sophie. You have to, or I swear to God." He took a step toward me, raising a hand. "I wouldn't do that," a deep voice rumbled from the doorway. We all turned. Standing there was Jim, my old colleague from the architecture firm. He was 6'4", built like a linebacker, and currently wearing a high-vis vest and a hard hat. Behind him were two other men. "Sophie," Jim asked, stepping into the room. "Door was open. We're here for the walk-through." "Jim," I breathed, relief flooding through me. "You're right on time." "Who is this?" Alina demanded, trying to pull her wrists free from Marcus. "This is Jim," I said. "He's a developer I used to work with. He specializes in commercial leases." "Leases?" Marcus asked, confused. "I'm not selling the house," I said, looking Marcus dead in the eye. "But the 20 acres of unused pasture land bordering the highway, I'm leasing it. Long-term ground lease. Solar farm. Jim brought the contract today." I looked at Mr. Sterling. "The signing bonus alone covers the property taxes for the next 5 years. The monthly rent covers the maintenance and my salary as the property manager." I turned back to Alina and Marcus. "I don't need your money. I don't need your severance package. And I certainly don't need you." Marcus stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The trap had snapped shut. He had no leverage. He had no money. And now he had no wife, judging by the way Alina was looking at him. "You," Alina whispered, looking at me with a mixture of hatred and grudging awe. "You lease the land." "I'm a landscape architect, Alina," I said coldly. "I know the value of dirt. Now get your stagers out of my house. And take your husband with you. I think you have a lot to talk about." Alina looked at Marcus. She looked at the lawsuit. She looked at the house she had lost. Then, for the first time in her life, she didn't argue. She didn't scream. She just looked, defeated. But Marcus wasn't done. He was shaking, his face turning a violent shade of purple. The walls were closing in, and he had nowhere left to run. "No," he shouted, lunging past Jim. "You can't do this. I need this." Marcus moved with the desperate, jagged speed of a man who saw his life evaporating. But Jim was faster. Before Marcus could reach me, Jim stepped in, his broad chest acting as a wall of high-visibility nylon and muscle. He didn't even have to strike Marcus. He simply caught him. He grabbed Marcus by the lapels of his expensive Italian suit and shoved him backward. Marcus stumbled, his heels catching on the edge of the oriental rug. He crashed into the heavy oak side table, sending a porcelain lamp, one my mother had loved, shattering to the floor. "That," Jim rumbled, his voice dangerously low, "was a mistake." The sound of the breaking ceramic seemed to snap something in the room. The air crackled with a chaotic energy. Mr. Sterling was already on his feet, his phone to his ear, his voice calm and authoritative. "Yes, 44 Oak Hill Drive. Immediate assistance required. We have a violent trespasser." "You don't understand," Marcus screamed, scrambling to his feet, ignoring the shards of porcelain. He looked wild, his hair disheveled, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "I need thy deal. The deadline is Friday. If I don't have the liquidity, they'll file criminal charges." "They already filed civil charges, Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria. I didn't step back. I didn't flinch. For the first time in years, I felt entirely powerful. "Criminal charges are next, regardless of what happens to this house." "No," he spun toward Alina, who was standing by the fireplace, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "Alina, tell them we're contesting the will. Tell them we're taking the house." Alina stared at him. She looked at the man she had married, really seeing him perhaps for the first time. She saw the sweat dripping down his face, the terror in his eyes, the pathetic desperation. "You lied to me," she whispered. Her voice was trembling, but it was audible in the sudden silence. "I did it for us," Marcus pleaded, reaching out to her. "To maintain our lifestyle. Alina, you like the cars, don't you? You like the club membership. I did what I had to do." "You gambled it," I interjected, stepping forward. I wanted Alina to hear this. I wanted to burn the truth into her mind so she could never look away again. He didn't invest it, Alina. The lawsuit says speculative high-risk leverage. He was playing roulette with his clients' retirement funds, and when he lost that, he started eyeing Mom and Dad's estate as his next pile of chips. "Shut up," Marcus shrieked at me. "You jealous, unloved little spinster. You think you've won? You're nothing, you're just the help." "And you," Alina said, her voice rising, gaining a sharp, jagged edge, are broke. Marcus froze. Alina slowly lowered her hand from her mouth. Her face wasn't sad anymore. It was hard. It was the face of the sister I remembered, the one who didn't tolerate failure. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. "I just got a notification," she said, her voice icy. "My credit card was declined for the coffee I bought on the way here. I thought it was a glitch. But it wasn't, was it, Marcus?" "Alina, please," Marcus whined, shrinking back. "You froze my assets," she said, taking a step toward him. "My personal savings. The inheritance Grandma left me. You commingled the funds, didn't you? You put my money into your slush fund." "I was going to put it back," Marcus cried. "Once the house sold, I was going to put it all back with interest." "You stole from me," Alina hissed. She was closing the distance between them now, her eyes blazing. "I stood by you. I let you insult my sister. I let you rush my parents' funeral. I let you convince me to evict my own flesh and blood because you said it was good business. But it wasn't business. It was theft." "Alina, baby." Smack. The sound of her hand connecting with his face echoed through the library like a gunshot. It was a chaotic, ugly moment. Marcus stumbled back, clutching his cheek. "Don't you ever call me that again," she spat. "You're done, we're done." "Mrs. Thorne," Mr. Sterling said, stepping forward, pocketing his phone. "The police are 3 minutes out. I suggest you step away from him. Let the law handle the rest." Alina looked at her hand, stinging and red. Then she looked at me. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence stretched, heavy and thick with the weight of years of resentment. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She was stripped of her pretenses. She was humiliated, broke, and married to a fraud. She had nothing left to hold over me. "He told me you were trying to cheat us," Alina said to me, her voice breaking. "He told me you were poisoning Mom and Dad against me so you could take it all. He made me feel like I had to fight you or I'd lose everything." "You didn't have to fight me, Alina," I said softly. "You just had to be here. You just had to care about them more than the property value." She flinched. The truth hit her harder than her slap had hit Marcus. "I know," she whispered, tears finally spilling over, ruining her perfect makeup. "I know." The sound of sirens cut through the air, growing louder as they approached the driveway. Blue and red lights began to flash through the library windows, painting the walls in a chaotic, strobe light rhythm. Marcus slumped into the wingback chair, Dad's chair, and put his head in his hands. He began to sob, a pathetic, heaving sound of a man who knew his game was over. Jim crossed his arms and stood over him, ensuring he wouldn't move until the officers walked through the door. I turned to the window and watched the police cruisers pull up. I felt a strange lightness in my chest, a release of pressure I hadn't realized I was carrying. The house was safe. The legacy was safe. And the monster was finally in the cage. The next hour was a blur of uniforms and statements. I watched from the porch as Marcus was led away in handcuffs. He didn't look back. He was already shrinking, his posture collapsed, his arrogance stripped away to reveal the hollow man beneath. Alina left separately. She didn't have her car. It turned out it was leased in the company name, and the police advised her not to take it. She called a taxi. Before she got in, she stood at the bottom of the porch steps, looking up at me. She looked small in the gray afternoon light. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, clutching her coat around her. "I said terrible things. I don't know who I became with him." "You became someone Mom and Dad wouldn't recognize," I said honestly. "I wasn't going to lie to her. I wasn't going to smooth it over." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I have nowhere to go. The condo is sealed. My accounts are frozen." I looked at her. I could have told her to find another place to die. I could have thrown her words right back in her face. It would have been justified. It would have been fair. But I looked at the house behind me. I looked at the garden I had planted. I thought about Mom, who always made extra food just in case a neighbor stopped by. I thought about Dad, who believed in second chances, even when people didn't deserve them. "Go to Aunt Claire S," I said. "I already called her. She's expecting you. She has the guest room made up." Elena looked at me, shocked. "You called her?" "Yes," I said, "because unlike you, Elena, I don't kick family out when they're down." She started to cry then, ugly, wrenching sobs that shook her shoulders. She didn't say thank you. She couldn't get the words out. But she nodded, wiped her face, and got into the taxi. 6 months later. The late summer sun was warm on my back as I knelt in the soil, planting the last of the autumn hydrangeas. The air smelled of earth and blooming jasmine. I stood up and wiped my hands on my jeans, looking out over the property. In the distance, beyond the line of heritage oaks, I could just make out the glint of the solar panels on the back 20 acres. They were silent, unobtrusive, and efficient. Jim had negotiated a fantastic deal. The lease payments had not only covered the property taxes, but had allowed me to hire a part-time crew to help with the groundskeeping. The house was breathing again. I had opened the drapes, polished the floors, and filled the rooms with fresh flowers. It didn't feel like a mausoleum anymore. It felt like a home. I walked up to the back porch and poured myself a glass of iced tea. A car pulled into the driveway, a modest, used sedan. Elena stepped out. She looked different. Her hair was cut shorter, a simple bob. She wasn't wearing designer labels. She was in jeans and a simple blouse. She looked younger, softer, and tired in a healthy, honest way. She walked up the steps, carrying a small box from a local bakery. "Peace offering?" she asked, holding up the box. "Lemon squares, Aunt Claire's recipe. I made them myself. I burned the first batch, but these are edible, I think." I smiled, taking the box. "I'll put the kettle on." We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where she had told me to die 6 months ago. The ghost of that memory was still there, but it was fading, replaced by the reality of the present. "How is the job?" I asked, pouring the tea. "It's humbling," Elena admitted, stirring sugar into her cup. She had gotten a job as a junior leasing agent at a small firm, starting from the bottom. "But I'm good at it, and it's honest work. I got my first commission check yesterday. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Marcus never touched it." "Have you heard from him?" Elena's face darkened slightly. "The trial starts next month. His lawyer is trying to plead insanity or addiction, but the paper trail is too long. Mr. Sterling says he's looking at 10 years minimum. I filed for divorce last week. It's uncontested." She took a sip of tea and looked around the kitchen. "The house looks beautiful, Sophie. You were right. You were always the one who made it shine." She put her cup down and looked me in the eye. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know I've said it over text, but I need to say it to your face. I'm sorry I wasn't there for Mom and Dad. And I'm sorry I treated you like you were invisible. I was jealous. I was jealous that you had their love and I just had things." "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it. "But Elena, don't ever test me again." "I won't," she promised. "I know who holds the cards now." We laughed, a tentative, fragile sound, but it was a start. Later that evening, after Elena had left, I walked into Dad's study. I sat in his wingback chair and looked at the photo on the desk, the 4 of us, years ago, on a summer vacation. We looked happy. I picked up the photo and dusted the frame. I had saved the house. I had saved the legacy. And in a strange way, by destroying the false life Elena had built, I had saved my sister too. I looked out the window at the long shadows stretching across the lawn. The sun was setting, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I'd found my place, and I wasn't going anywhere.